So, what do you get when you cross 007, The Matrix, and theoretical physics? Well, probably not laid. But also, Tenet. And maybe a headache? Christopher Nolan's 11th feature has been available on demand for a while now after having had a bit of an understandably weird run in the theaters. Now, I got to see it on the big screen back in August, and I remember my initial reaction being a bit mixed, but on the whole, mostly positive. I enjoyed the film's practical effect sequences, the ambitious non-linear premise, the strong pacing punctuated by a pulsating, highly original soundtrack. You know, your average Nolan joint. Still, a couple of things that leave me scratching my head for a while going, am I perhaps not as smart as I thought? Are movies supposed to make
Why are
you
so
feel
many
this
people
way?
talking unintelligibly through masks?
Wait, didn't that character die already? Should I call my mom more often?
Why are so many people talking unintelligibly through
Is
masks?
Christopher Nolan trolling us? You know,
You're average.
I was, however, sufficiently intrigued about the Rubik's Cube-like quality of the film, although it has some glaring, undeniable issues, too much exposition. It struck me as the kind of film that merits watching at least a second time before making up your mind about it. So I did. And I'm kind of glad that I did. Tenet is, by design, a movie that requires and rewards multiple viewings, not just to understand it, but to experience it in full as its director in Tenet. Get it? Because it's the title of. Okay, moving on. Now, I have enjoyed enough of Nolan's work to know what to expect, to have a sense of what he excels at as a filmmaker and what aspects he just doesn't seem to get right sometimes. But overall, even though I wouldn't call myself a fanboy necessarily, I genuinely believe Nolan's creative output results in a net positive for the world of cinema. More often than not, he manages to find a balance between grandiose, high budget spectacle and thought provoking premises. He has a penchant. He likes well executed real life set piece stunts reminiscent of old timey silent movie greats like Buster Keaton while attempting to tell us stories in unconventional ways. Tenet is by far his most puzzle as a movie offering to date, and judging by some of the reviews and general comments online, it's perhaps his most divisive as well. The stuff I've seen so far ranges anywhere between "this shit is bananas, I fucking love it," and "this shit is banana, it fucking sucks." And if your sentiments toward this film gravitate more towards the latter, I kinda get it. The mere promise of just solving an audiovisual puzzle is not enough to get some people to invest another 2.5 hours in a movie that already felt a bit too much like homework to begin with. But, if you are the kind of person that does get a kickity kick out of something like this, then let me make a case for why I think you should do our old pal Nolan a solid and check it out. And if you've already seen it and are like, why it's perhaps worth checking out a second, if not a third, fourth time. Now, don't worry, I'm not gonna try to untangle Tenet's loopy timelines, much less explain the theoretical physics it's supposedly based on. People much smarter than me have already done that. This isn't even a review as such. I mean, I guess I could review it. Okay, I'm gonna review it. Tenet is great. Is it my favorite Nolan movie? Nope. It is, however, a dizzying, globetrotting, albeit somewhat cold, stylish romp with an intentionally confusing premise that often doesn't seem to make much sense, and even when it does make sense, it'll make you question if anything makes sense, because does anything really make sense at the moment? At all? It doesn't. There's a now infamous wink wink nudge nudge fourth wall breaking moment in the movie where a character suggests that our protagonist, John David Washington, not try to understand what's going on and instead just feel it, which I know seems like a little bit too much on the nose. Like, is the movie telling us that we're too stupid to get what's really going on? Or is it admitting to us that the logic will fall apart if we try to figure it out? But as it turns out, I think there's a third possibility here, that it's a genuine instruction. You see, I think Nolan is like a sharply dressed film shaman. He's telling us to relax after we've sipped from the cup of cinematic ayahuasca that he's prepared for us. I can even hear his mildly mannered British accent going, "Well, let my trippy, sleek, oddly sound mixed sci-fi mayhem just wash over you." I think it's no secret that Nolan's movies often serve as elaborate audiovisual metaphors for the craft of movie making itself. For instance, Memento is all about the script writing process. The Prestige is about how a film is essentially a life-consuming magic trick making us forget reality for a couple of hours. Inception is a breakdown of the different people behind the camera that are necessary to tell a story on screen, and Interstellar is about... Actually, I'm still not quite sure what that one's about. It's the power of love. It's the power of love. In this vein, Tenet is about the audience as an integral component of the cinematic experience. In the very opening sequence of the film, we see a crowd of people put to sleep in front of a stage just as the nameless protagonist enters the scene. Moments later, after experiencing a rebirth of sorts, this nameless protagonist unwittingly enters a world of even more subterfuge and secrecy, a world that even for a CIA agent like him had been hiding unnoticed in plain sight. In a sense, the protagonist's awakening is meant to stand for our own awakening to the world of the narrative. This, I suspect, is also why Nolan gives us virtually no backstory for the character. He's supposed to seem like an empty shell. This is by no means the first time that Nolan has given us a character as a blank slate. For instance, the Joker in The Dark Knight is purely allegorical. He's not meant to depict a realistic human, but instead represent an abstract idea on screen. In the case of the Joker, the embodied concept is chaos, anarchic disruption of order. He's a force of destruction trying to get our hero to betray his own morals and convictions. That's his sole purpose. Heath Ledger's compelling performance makes us forget that we essentially know nothing about the character beyond his actions as we witness them unfold on screen. He's the perfect manifestation of evil with perfect comedic timing.
Very poor choice of words.
Now, the symbolic role of Tenet's protagonist, on the other hand, is a bit harder to define at first. Despite John David Washington's solid performance, it isn't obvious from the get-go what he's supposed to represent. Eventually, it becomes clear that his basic narrative function is that of an experiential vessel for our convenience. He's an intelligence agent who's given up his life for a higher purpose of keeping the world safe. He's like a nameless cowboy who rides into town to save the day, despite being a bit over his head.
I don't think it's nice you laughing.
I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago.
Now, is it really necessary for him to have a dead wife or kids he's not allowed to see to understand his actions and give him emotional depth? That stuff kind of made sense for Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Inception, but I think it would be kind of out of place here in the same way it would have been out of place for Neo in the Matrix movies.
Whoa.
Now, speaking of Inception, I like that movie just as much as the next guy, but I don't remember anyone walking out of the theater in 2010 going, "Wow, that whole thing with the kids and the crazy dead wife was riveting." If I'm honest, it actually kind of gets in the way of what makes the film compelling in the first place. I watched it again for the purpose of this essay. I challenge anyone to explain how dream-sharing technology works without contradicting yourself a bunch of times like they do in the movie.
Don't show me specifics. Only the dreamer should know the layout. Why is that so important?
In case one of us brings in our projections, we don't want them knowing the details of the maze.
Did Eames add any features?
I don't think I should tell you. If Maul
We
finds
don't
out
have
that
time for this. Did he add anything?
he added an air duct system that can cut through the maze.
Good. Explain it to them.
No, she is not real.
How do you know that?
She's just a projection.
No.
It's still a very entertaining watch, though. I mean, there's a fight scene inside a life-size corridor that's spinning around like a dream within a dream, which just happens to feel like the most realistic moment in the film. I mean, that in itself is quite an achievement. And the ideas about dreams and the mystery of the unconscious are also pretty interesting, if somewhat superficial. They do, however, allow Nolan to explore unconventional story structure in a visual medium. Ultimately, it's how Nolan reinvents the heist movie trope with genuinely creative visual concepts that makes Inception so indelible. That and the incredibly dapper dudes. Likewise, Tenet is not trying to be a mere spy action thriller with a straightforward beginning and an end. It's more of an experience that questions the conventional way we think of that most unbendable of phenomena, time. Beyond the flimsy environmentalist message about how our children's children are trying to punish us for our indifference towards the environment, I think Nolan is trying to encourage us to challenge our own preconceptions about how stories can be told. For instance, what if, contrary to what convention dictates, our main character's background is in his future instead of his past? What if you could design a film which, every time you see it, your perspective on what's happening on screen and the role that the characters play changes ever so slightly? Watching Tenet a second, third, fourth time felt like rereading one of those classic books I was assigned in high school. It's important to come back to those books a little later in life, when you're slightly less dumb and horny and able to understand their value. And it's been my personal experience that some of those books and films are worth revisiting a few more times in life. Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of the most respected works in cinematic history. It was, however, extremely divisive when it came out. It got panned by critics, audiences would walk out in the middle of screenings confused or even angry at what they'd just seen. It wasn't until a couple of years later, when the film was released in cinemas after it started gaining a cult following among stoners, that it began earning the status that it's known for today. Some people might still find it tedious and/or pretentious, but its influence and inspirational reach is simply undeniable. Now, before any Kubrick heads out there flip out, I'm not saying that Tenet is this generation's Space Odyssey. My point is simply that just as cinema goers in the film intelligentsia found the film too jarring in 1968, it might take your average Netflix streamer or YouTube reviewer a little while to warm up to Nolan's noble, if at sometimes clunky, attempt at something different. Towards the end of the movie, the character of Neil, played by the now consistently reliable Robert Pattinson, delivers an even more telling line. What's happened happened, which is an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world, not an excuse to do nothing. I think this line works on two levels. It's a call to action to do something against what we believe is wrong in the world despite the circumstances formed by our past. It's also an invitation to trust the process of what we're seeing on screen, to first learn to feel before we can understand, and as much as our initial instinct might be to resist. In my book, There are few other filmmakers working today who have gained that trust like Christopher Nolan has.